You were never taught how the world really works. You were taught how they wanted you to behave in it. Since you were a child, they told you, be nice, be polite, don't raise your voice, share your toys, say sorry, even if you're not wrong. If someone mistreats you, turn the other cheek. If someone disrespects you, be the bigger person. If someone crosses your boundaries, just breathe and move on. Be the good one, be the understanding one, be the safe one. And at first, it made sense. Because being good got you praise, approval, smiles. Teachers loved it, parents bragged about it, friends leaned on it. Society rewarded you for being agreeable, for being easy, for being nice. But then, something changed. You grew up, and suddenly, that same goodness started costing you everything. Now you're in relationships where you're constantly overgiving and overlooked. You're the one who calls first, texts first, apologizes first, even when it wasn't your fault. You're the one who listens to her problems at 2 a.m., but your silence at 2 p.m. goes unnoticed. You're the one who stays, forgives, understands, and still ends up alone. Or worse, replaced by someone who doesn't do half of what you did. And the worst part? Deep down, you know it. You feel it. You sense that no matter how hard you try to be kind, patient, generous, it's never enough. Not for them, not for her, not for anyone. But here's the part that hurts the most. It's not that they can't see your goodness. It's that they don't respect it. Because in the real world, outside of children's stories and fairy tales, being nice without boundaries doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. No one fears the predictable. No one admires the overly available. And no one respects the man who constantly sacrifices himself just to be liked. You've been conditioned to believe that your emotional availability is a gift. But in the eyes of many, it's just a weak spot, an opening, a soft target. She won't say it out loud, but she tests you. Not because she's evil, but because it's human nature. She pushes to see if you'll push back. She disrespects to see if there's a line. She withdraws to see if you'll chase. And if you do, again and again, she might smile, but inside, something breaks. Because attraction doesn't come from comfort. It comes from tension, polarity, strength. And if every time she pokes, you fold. If every time she pulls away, you run closer. You're not a man in her eyes. You're a follower, a pleaser, a placeholder. And placeholders are replaceable. This doesn't just apply to romantic relationships. Look at your friendship, your job, your family. How many times have you been the one they all rely on, but never prioritize? The one who gets the call when someone needs help, but is the last to be invited when things go well? The one who gives advice, lends money, drives across town, only to be ghosted once the problem is solved? It's not because you're not valuable. It's because you've taught them to treat you like an option. Your kindness has become expected. Your patience has become routine. Your forgiveness has become a license to repeat the same behavior. You've built a prison with your own virtue. And the worst part? They won't set you free because your role, your compliance, benefits them. They like the version of you who doesn't argue, who accepts everything, who makes their life easier at the expense of your own. But tell me, who makes your life easier? Who protects your heart? Who sees your efforts when no one's watching? Who holds your silence when you're breaking? Who reminds you that you're more than just a soft landing for everyone else's chaos? Because if no one does, and if you're not doing it for yourself, then what are you really offering? Kindness is only a gift when it comes from overflow, when it comes from power, not when it comes from fear, not when it's your only strategy for being wanted. You've been told that being a nice guy is the right thing, but Machiavelli would disagree. He would say, a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything is bound to come to ruin among so many who are not good. And that's the harsh truth you were never prepared for. Your downfall is not your darkness. It's your obsession with being liked. You've mistaken being accepted for being safe. But the more you try to be everything for everyone, the more you lose yourself. And the irony is, they don't even notice the parts of you that die in the process. You didn't start this way. You weren't always the one who said yes when you meant no. You weren't always the one who swallowed your voice just to keep the peace. You weren't born trying to be small, safe, inoffensive. That was trained into you. It began with subtle corrections. A raised eyebrow when you got too loud. A sharp, "Don't be selfish," when you wanted more. Be a good boy. Stop crying. You're overreacting. You were taught early that certain parts of you were too much, too angry, too intense, too needy, too honest. So you learned to bury them. You learned that love came with condition, that peace required sacrifice, that to be liked, you had to shrink. And what started as survival became personality. Now you don't even notice it anymore. The way you soften your tone when you disagree, the way you smile when something bothers you, the way you say, "It's okay" out of habit, even when it's not. You've become so used to walking on eggshells, you don't even remember what it's like to walk free. But here's the brutal truth. This kindness you keep offering is no longer kindness. It's fear. It's fear of being seen as difficult, fear of being rejected, fear of being left. So you play it safe. You stay agreeable. You anticipate everyone's needs before they ask. You learn to read her mood before she even speaks. You walk into every room scanning for approval like a soldier checking for landmines. And the worst part? You think that makes you empathetic, but it doesn't. It makes you scared. And fear is the most expensive currency in a relationship. It buys temporary acceptance, but costs you permanent respect. She might not say it directly, but she feels it. Every time you let her get away with disrespect. Every time you smile through discomfort. Every time you apologize just to calm things down. She feels your fear. She senses the imbalance. And something inside her quietly shuts off. Because here's what no one told you. People don't respect emotional begging. They don't value the love that comes too easily. They don't feel safe with someone who's always afraid to lose them. They crave presence, solidity, gravity. But how can you have gravity when you bend to everyone's expectations? You've mistaken emotional flexibility for strength. But strength isn't how much you can bend. It's how clearly you draw the line. Take a moment and think. When was the last time you said no without guilt? When was the last time you chose yourself without apology? When was the last time you stood your ground even when it made someone uncomfortable? Because that is the moment your identity begins to rebuild. Machiavelli would say, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose." And though you're not a ruler of nations, you are the ruler of your own emotional kingdom. But you've let everyone walk in without knocking. You've handed out keys to people who never earned your trust. And now you wonder why you feel invaded, empty, disrespected. You taught them how to treat you. And now you're the one who has to unteach them. Not by screaming, not by complaining, but by becoming someone who doesn't need to be accepted in order to feel worthy. Let that land. You don't need to be accepted to be worthy. This is the part where the old version of you will start to fight back. He'll say, "But if I stop being kind, they'll leave, and maybe they will." But if someone only stays when you're bending, do they really see you? You see, every time you abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable, you're training your nervous system to believe that you are dangerous, that you are the problem, that your truth is a liability, that your needs are an inconvenience. And the longer you live this way, the more alienated you become. From your anger, from your instincts, from your voice. This is why so many men lose their edge. They start off strong, clear, certain, but slowly, the need to be loved poisons their backbone. They trade truth for comfort, fire for peace, power for acceptance. And they don't even see it happening because it's dressed as love. You should be more understanding. You need to communicate better. You're overreacting, so they adjust. Again and again, until one day, they look in the mirror and don't recognize who they are anymore. Just a shape molded by other people's needs, a shadow of the man they could have been. But shadows don't command presence, and presence is everything. When a man enters a room with his spine intact, his voice calm, his emotions steady, something happens. People pause. They notice. They feel him, not because he demands attention, but because he doesn't need it. That's what real power is, the ability to take up space without explanation, to say less but mean more, to live with boundaries so clear, even silence becomes a statement. That's the man she can't manipulate. That's the man the world either respects or avoids. That's the man you're capable of becoming. But first, you have to kill the version of yourself who believes being agreeable is the only way to be loved. Because that man is not loved. He is tolerated, used, silently pitied, and eventually forgotten. And you were not born to be forgotten. They won't tell you to your face. They won't say, "I don't respect you because you're too kind." They won't look you in the eye and admit, "I stopped desiring you the moment I realized I had total emotional control over you." But they show you. They show you in the way they respond to your messages 2 hours later with one-word replies. They show you when they go silent for days and expect you to still be waiting. They show you when they flirt with others in front of you, knowing you'll never say a word. They show you every time they push your boundaries just to see if you'll flinch. And if you don't, if you let it slide again and again, they learn something. They learn that your kindness is not a sign of strength. It's a symptom of fear. You're afraid to be alone. You're afraid to be disliked. You're afraid to walk away. So instead of drawing lines, you lower your standards. You call it patience, but it's really hesitation. You call it understanding, but it's really self-abandonment. You call it empathy, but it's really the slow erosion of your spine. And they feel it. They may not know how to explain it, but they sense the softness in you, not the noble kind, but the weak kind, the kind that comes from needing too much and demanding too little. Machiavelli wouldn't even have to hear your voice. He'd see your body language, the way you lean in too far, laugh too quickly, apologize too often. He'd see that you're not standing on your own ground. You're orbiting someone else's world, hoping to be enough. But here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. The more you need to be chosen, the less worthy of choice you appear. It's brutal. It's unfair. But it's real. Because in every relationship, romantic, professional, social, there's a silent currency being exchanged. Power. And you're leaking yours. Let me ask you something. When was the last time she had to wonder what you were thinking? When was the last time you left a conversation without explaining your every emotion? When was the last time your absence made her nervous? If the answer is never, then you've been too accessible for too long. This is where the paradox begins. The more present you are, the more she pulls away. The more you explain, the less she listens. The more you chase, the faster she runs. And suddenly, you're not in a relationship. You're in a game, a performance, a one-man show she stopped watching weeks ago. Because what most men never understand is that attention isn't the same as affection. She may reply, she may engage, she may even sleep with you, but that doesn't mean she respects you. And respect is the real currency. You can give her the world, but if you do it with your head bowed and your heart wide open with no boundaries, she'll take it and walk away without looking back. Because she didn't want the world. She wanted a man who wouldn't collapse just to keep her. The world perceives the nice guy not as noble, but as naive, and in some cases, desperate. Because, let's be honest, if you're constantly proving your worth, offering endless support, tolerating disrespect, and adjusting your personality to stay in someone's life, what message are you sending? You're saying, "I'll do anything to be accepted, even if it means disappearing as a man." And the moment you send that message, everything changes. People cancel plans with you last minute because you'll understand. People take advantage of your generosity because you won't fight back. People emotionally dump on you because they know you won't say enough. You've become the emotional landfill for everyone else's issue, but no one ever asks what you need. And here's the twist. You trained them to treat you that way, with every second chance, with every forced smile, with every "it's okay" when it wasn't, with every boundary you didn't defend. You thought you were earning love, but you were just teaching them that you don't require much to stay. And when someone requires nothing, they are given nothing. Respect comes when you show that you won't tolerate being treated like an afterthought. Attraction grows when your presence feels like a privilege, not a guarantee. Authority is born the moment you stop needing their validation to breathe. And yet, so many men sabotage their own power every single day by doing what they were taught was right. They flood her inbox with long messages, hoping clarity will win her back. They show up with gifts, apologies, affection, trying to fix what was never broken. Because the issue was never about what they gave. It was always about what they lacked: posture, restraint, mystery, and boundaries. This is where the transformation begins, not when you stop caring, but when you stop caring more than they do. Not when you stop loving, but when you love yourself enough to walk away if you're not met with respect. Not when you stop giving, but when you stop giving to those who only take. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't reward kindness, it rewards consequence. People don't change because you explain. They change because you disappear. They don't value you because you try harder. They value you because you show that you don't need them to survive. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming unshakable. And once you taste that version of yourself, you never go back. She won't admit it. She may tell you she wants a kind man, a caring man, someone emotionally available, someone who listens, someone who understands. She might say she wants a man who opens up, who expresses his feelings, who communicates with vulnerability. And you believed her, so you gave her all of that. You gave her time, attention, validation, emotional safety, warmth. You opened your chest. You told her your secrets. You reassured her when she pulled away. You texted good morning, good night. You waited by your phone when she didn't respond. You tried harder every time she became colder. But what happened? She began to drift. Slowly at first. Less interest, shorter answers, colder kisses, more space, less warmth. And you thought, maybe she's just tired. Maybe she needs reassurance. So you doubled down. You gave even more. And that's when she disappeared. Not physically, emotionally, energetically. The same woman who used to crave your attention now treats it like noise. The same woman who used to smile at your messages now takes hours to respond. The same woman who once admired your presence now acts like it's a burden. You feel the shift. You sense the disrespect. But you can't understand why. Let me tell you something most men will never hear out loud. She didn't lose interest because you were bad. She lost respect because you were predictable. Because while you were trying to be the good guy, she was testing for strength. While you were trying to keep her close, she was checking if you'd ever push back. While you were offering emotional softness, she was wondering if you had any edges, and you had none. Because you thought love was about proving your worth. You thought connection meant submission. You thought the more available you were, the safer the bond would become. But here's what no one tells you. Respect is the foundation of desire, and nothing kills respect faster than over-accessibility. The moment she knows you'll tolerate anything, say yes to everything, and never walk away no matter how she acts, that's when the pedestal crumbles. That's when admiration dies. That's when her instincts say, he's safe, but he's not strong. She doesn't want to feel like your emotional center. She wants to orbit a man who has his own gravity, a man who makes her pause before she speaks, a man who, through his presence alone, sets the tone of the room, a man who doesn't need to threaten to be respected, but whose absence would be punishment enough. Think about it. How do you react to someone who is emotionally calm, unbothered, self-contained? You notice, you adjust, you respect, not because they demand it, but because they don't chase it. And in that stillness, there's something magnetic. That's what she's craving. Not chaos, not arrogance, but emotional weight. You can love deeply and still be immovable. You can care genuinely and still say no. You can show affection and still let her feel the consequences of disrespect. But most men confuse love with obedience. They confuse kindness with self-erasure. They think boundaries are the opposite of connection, when in fact, boundaries are the birthplace of connection, because without them, there's no polarity, no tension, no friction. And without friction, there is no spark. This is why women often stay with men who are colder, more stoic, even unpredictable. It's not because they enjoy suffering, it's because those men impose gravity. Their no means something. Their presence isn't handed out like candy. They don't speak much, but when they do, people listen. And when those men do offer affection, it feels earned. Meanwhile, you've been handing out gold like it's cheap. You've been loving on credit, hoping that eventually it'll be reciprocated. But all that's done is devalue your emotional currency. Because let's face it, if something's always available, always soft, always ready, it becomes background noise. You weren't rejected for being kind. You were dismissed for being weightless. Machiavelli didn't believe in cruelty for the sake of pain. He believed in consequence, that people only truly behave when they know behavior has cost, that if you want to be respected, you must be able to withdraw, to disappear, to cut off what is misused. And if you're honest with yourself, you haven't done that. You've tolerated late replies. You've accepted breadcrumbing. You've forgiven lies without real change. You've stayed when you should have walked, because you hoped it would turn around. But things don't turn around because you try harder. They turn around when your presence becomes something that can be lost. And that means stepping back. Not out of manipulation, but out of self-preservation, out of dignity, out of clarity. When you stop making excuses for poor behavior, you stop giving people permission to treat you like an option. And when she sees that shift in you, not the angry version, not the emotional explosion, but the cold, calm, quiet withdrawal, something changes. Suddenly, she notices your silence. Suddenly, she questions your absence. Suddenly, you're no longer a given. That's when you reclaim your power, not by force, but by absence, loaded with meaning. You don't need to yell, you don't need to beg, you don't need to explain. You just need to become the man who doesn't chase validation, the man who doesn't need to be liked to feel whole, the man who can walk away, not out of hate, but because he knows that respect is more important than attention. And once you live like that, the entire dynamic shifts, not just with her, but with everyone. You've been dismantled, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, piece by piece. You gave a little more than you should have. You tolerated a little more than you were comfortable with. You stayed a little longer than you were respected. And each time, a small part of you disappeared, until one day you woke up and didn't recognize yourself. Not because you lost who you were, but because you never fully became who you were meant to be. You were too busy pleasing, softening, submitting, bending, surviving. But now, you're done. Because something inside you is shifting. The fire you smothered for years is starting to flicker. And though it's faint, you feel it. The weight of your own silence is finally louder than the fear of not being liked. This is where your reconstruction begins. But be warned, it's not going to look like revenge. It's not about becoming cruel or cold. It's about becoming complete. You don't need to become louder. You need to become heavier. The kind of man who walks into a room and doesn't explain himself. The kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. The kind of man who, by simply existing, makes people reevaluate how they treat him. That man isn't built in a weekend. He's forged, layer by layer, scar by scar. And it starts with this. Stop proving your value. Start protecting it. You've spent years handing out your time, your attention, your emotional labor like free samples, hoping someone would recognize your worth and reward you with love. But now, you understand that true value doesn't beg. It chooses. When you walk away from disrespect without announcement, you're no longer desperate. You're dignified. When you choose solitude over fake connection, you're no longer lonely. You're dangerous. When you speak less and move with precision, people start to wonder, what changed? And that's the point. Let them wonder. Let them feel your distance. Let them miss the version of you they never appreciated. Because from now on, you're no longer in the business of being nice. You're in the business of being undeniable. Nice men are tolerated, clear men are respected, and men with presence, those men are remembered. But presence isn't something you perform, it's something you build. It starts in the smallest moments, saying no and not explaining why, taking space when something doesn't feel right, not chasing after someone who shows disinterest, letting silence speak louder than desperation, listening more than reacting. You reclaim yourself by stopping the performance. You become powerful not when you change your tone, but when you stop asking for permission to speak. This is what she was secretly hoping you'd become. Not the yes man, not the emotional butler, but the man with his own rhythm, his own code, his own gravity. Because at her core, beneath the words, beneath the emotional smokescreens, she doesn't want a man who's soft all the time. She wants a man who can hold her storm without drowning in it. A man who can say, "This doesn't work for me," and mean it. That's not harsh. That's clarity. And clarity is magnetic. She will test it. She will challenge it. She may even push harder at first. But when she sees that your boundaries don't bend, that your love has standards, that your presence is not guaranteed, something in her recalibrates. That's when attraction returns. That's when respect is rebuilt. That's when you stop being an emotional seat cushion and start becoming the pillar. But it only happens if you stop reverting. You can't go back. Not to the version of you that apologized for existing. Not to the man who tried to earn connection through emotional acrobatics. Not to the ghost who smiled through pain, hoping someone would notice. He's gone. In his place stands someone else. Someone who speaks less, but speaks truth. Who doesn't raise his hand to be seen, but is impossible to ignore. Who doesn't ask, "What do you need from me?" but instead asks, "Do you even deserve what I offer?" That man doesn't fall into love. He evaluates it. That man doesn't chase validation. He cultivates it within himself. That man doesn't fear losing people because he never fears losing himself again. That man is not built on charm. He is built on standards. And while the world may never thank you for becoming him, it will always notice, especially the people who once took you for granted. They will stare at the new version of you. They will remember how easy it was to mistreat the old one. They will realize too late that silence has a memory, and absence, when earned, is unforgettable. This is how your story changes, not by changing how others see you, but by changing how you see yourself. From now on,